Morning folks, Kevin here. Well, it's August 15th, 2017, and I've been working up in the keyhole garden area, pulling out the rocks and starting to move some of the soil out. We've had a couple of days of dryness, so the ground is dried up enough where I can work on it with the equipment. Yesterday I came out and put that cap, that was the final piece of metal that I had to put on the honey hut. So I got that on yesterday. And two of the hives in there showed more activity than usual, making me suspicious that we're going to have another swarm and all. Being this late in the season in this part of the country, I had the option of potentially doing splits at that time. Splitting the hive up and letting the queens sort things out and see how well they do. However, we're right on that tipping point in this part of the country, and I worry that if I do the splits, that the colonies may not build up enough so that they can survive the winter. So yesterday I said, well, if they're going to swarm, they're going to swarm. If they swarm and they end up in a location that's easy to get, I'll go ahead and see if I can grab the swarm at that time, set them up in a hive, see how well they build up over the season, and then make a decision, should I go ahead and combine hives at that time. So we're in a better situation this year than we've ever been in before, because right now we have the honey hut enclosure over the hives. So I was out here working, driving back and forth, going alongside of the food forest here with the stones to an area that I'm going to be putting the stones in. And I could see a swarm forming about 9:30 in the morning. So I'll turn the camera around and we'll show you. So here we are, just a short distance. This is a nectarine tree, one of the ones that was a victim of deer rub. All these ones here were. And I already peeled off all the nectarines this year. And I don't know if you could see the bees up in here yet. I know some people would get very nervous about the idea of being this close to a swarm of bees, especially with the movies. They always make these things seem so dangerous and all. But honestly, a swarm really isn't in a state where they're traveling to a new location to try and set up a new hive. And they really aren't defending their home like if you went into their hive and disrupted them. So honestly, I mean, they're absolutely fine all around us and all. I could touch them and they'll get right on my hands and all. The thing is, I don't want to disturb them or bother them. I'm hooked on a branch here. So the question is, I don't want to use a vacuum system to go ahead and remove these bees. I do have one that I would do to clean up if I were doing a cutout. That's removing a hive from somebody's home so I can get as many of the bees out as possible. But when you're using a vacuum system, even using all the techniques that I use, there's still a lot of trauma that happens to the bees, and you lose some of the bees' lives. So I want to do as little damage as possible. So typically when I get a swarm like this, what I'll do is I'll cut off the limb, and I just have to decide, is this something that I want to do with this tree? And potentially yes. I'll give them a little bit of time to settle down. They've only began their swarm about 15 minutes ago, left the hive that is. So I'll give them a little bit of time, and we'll see what I end up doing. The attachment area here for this swarm is a little bit wide. Could I try and shake them off into a box and carry the box over? I tend not to have as much success with that situation when it's so wide. If it's a nice narrow one and a larger swarm, I can usually drop them in pretty quickly and easily. But this limb, I decided, it's in the IOA here, it's one of the deer rub ones. Maybe I could still salvage this tree. I think what I'm going to try and do is take her off about here and see if I can bring this over and then shake them into the box, and hopefully I'll get the queen in there and they may set up. I'll put a full box of honey on top with comb already built out that they built, that the other bees built over the last fall. So we'll see how that goes. This is a little bit thick for my pruners, so we'll see what I do. These two boxes here, this one and this one is completely filled with combed honey. There may be some pollen in there as well. But this box here is just a box with the top frames on it. They're just top framed Warre hives. These are the two boxes that I brought the branch over on top of. The top box, I usually leave all of the top bars out of. The lower box, I leave the top bars in place. So this is a box with the top bars in place so the bees can build their wax comb downward, and thereby the queen can start laying her eggs in the brood comb, or they can actually start storing honey, pollen, nectar, whatever happens. So this is what's on the bottom one, so that the bees have something to go ahead and attach to. The bees typically tend to move up, and if the honey's here, they tend to seem a bit more secure with the system. They often will take over the hive that I've set up for them. Then we have the second box with all of the top bars on it, and that's usually where they'll start to attach to, and the queen will be surrounded by all her bees, and then the bees will start building the comb in here for them to start laying the queen to start laying the brood. This box is missing the top bars. And here's a box without the top bars in place. And the reason that I have this box on top of a box with the top bars on it is so that when I get a branch that's shorter, in other words, the swarm is more vertically oriented instead of horizontally oriented, I'll go ahead and set that small branch right down inside of this box, cover it up to the way that I did, and there's a great deal of success in that situation. I'd say there's probably about a 75–80% chance that the bees will set up in here. With the honey here, it's just late in the season. I'm just not positive that this is going to work out, that they'll build up enough. But I just have to have the common sense to go ahead and combine some of my hives if they don't have enough of an established colony or enough of established resources to make it through the winter. With the honey hut construction now, that should work out much better. So, that's that. So you may be able to see that there still are quite a few bees searching for the branch and the queen and their colony, their new colony that they're setting up. I'm not going to disturb this area anymore. I'll come back and prune this tree later on. Well, it's been a few hours. It's after lunch. It's about 3 o'clock, and there's no more bees around here where I removed the swarm from. Often they'll be here, sometimes for a couple of days, the bees that can't find their way, especially the ones that are out looking for a new site to set up their hive. So let's go over to the honey hut and see what's going on with the hive. So this is the hive that we put the swarm in. See a fair number of workers out there. There are some drones there in front of the hive as well. And the two hives that I suspected might actually swarm, but are actually doing very well, those two hives did not swarm. So if this one does well, then we'll have 5 hives that are active. Not bad for starting off with 1 hive at the beginning of the season. So I hope that this video was somewhat informative and gives you an idea how I go ahead and capture a swarm. It's really dependent on where it's located and how I'm actually going to try and bring them in. If at all possible, I try not to use the vacuum. I save that predominantly for when I'm going ahead and doing a cutout, moving a hive out of somebody's residence. So if this was helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and thanks so much for watching, folks. I really appreciate it. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye now.